So for more, we now welcome Professor Alan Dershowitz, Professor Emeritus at Harvard Law School, joining us from Miami. Professor, thank you for joining us here on i24 News. So let's start with this major blow for the prosecution. The bombshell leak late last week in which judges told prosecutors they should back off from that bribery charge in case 4000, as it has little chance, pushing the sides to reach an arrangement for the sake of the country. That was the quote. This was the most serious charge against Netanyahu around positive media coverage. So should Netanyahu go for a plea deal? Your thoughts?
Well, I always thought that 4,000 was the weakest of the cases because every politician always wants good media coverage. And if you went after politicians who were accused of doing favors for getting media coverage, half of the American Congress and half of the Israeli Knesset would be prosecuted. I think the case ought to be dropped at this point. I think we got a hint from the judges that the most important case is really over. As far as the Milchan testimony, it's exactly the same as we had seen before. There should be an Israeli law in the future designating how much money and gifts can be received without there being criminal prosecution. There is no such law. It's an extremely vague law, and it's up to the judges to determine how much is too much. We've had 3 cases like that in the United States recently. We had Senator Menendez, who was accused of taking trips and getting favors and getting financial benefits in exchange for doing favors for a very close friend. And that case ended in an acquittal. Now we have 2 other cases, one involving Justice Clarence Thomas of the Supreme Court of the United States, and another one involving another justice, both of whom allegedly accepted favors from close personal friends. And the law generally doesn't prohibit specifically exchanges of favors from personal friends. I'm a friend of Benjamin Netanyahu. I've given him advice. And every time I go to his house for dinner, I bring him a book, one of my books. Now, fortunately, my books are worthless, so he doesn't listen. But the idea of having rules without designated specific numbers is just against the rule of law. Israel should pass a law saying anything of value beyond 10,000 shekels or 20,000 shekels or whatever has to be reported or can't be accepted. Then you can see whether the line was crossed. But for prosecutors to say, well, there was a lot of champagne, there was a lot of cigars, there was some jewelry, we don't know exactly where the line is, how much is too much, that is not a proper basis for a criminal charge. So I think all the charges against Netanyahu should be dropped. He should be allowed to govern. He should be allowed to compromise over the judicial reform. We should be able to go on with matters. I think this has lasted long enough, and it's crumbling. It's falling apart. It isn't getting any stronger.
As you've alluded to, politically, there are huge implications. Obviously, Israelis have had 5 election campaigns in recent years. The corruption cases were obviously hotly debated throughout. When it comes to how this could impact Benjamin Netanyahu's ability to lead the country and stain his image, if the bribery charge, the one that is most significant, is no longer relevant, what impact does that have on the other cases? You say that they should go away. Will the courts do the same?
Well, I would hope so. In the Menendez case, what happened is there was a hung jury, and then the judge acquitted on a few of the charges, and then the prosecution said, there's not enough here, and we're going to drop the charges. That should happen here. The prosecution has been given a hint by the judges about the most serious case, and I think that the answer is for the benefit of Israel, for the good of Israel, for the good of trying to present a united front at a time when Israel has very, very serious problems, both domestic and international, from terrorism, from Iran, from the United States administration, which is not being as friendly as it should be. Prime Minister Netanyahu should be given the power to govern without the shadows of these charges against him, especially since the charges seem to be falling apart. Otherwise, we're going to see trials going on for another few years, and it's going to impact on the ability of Israel to present the united front. So I think it's in the interest of Israel, and I love Israel, and I love the judicial system of Israel, and I just think that this is the time for prosecutors to use their good judgment and drop all the cases. Let the public decide what it thinks of what Netanyahu may have done or didn't do, but this should be an issue for voters, not for the courts.
So just to be clear, your understanding in terms of what Netanyahu should do next, should he go for a plea deal given that the case still does exist, so to speak?
I think he should fight the case, but whether he and his lawyers decide to sit down and negotiate, as you know, there were negotiations earlier on that fell through. Netanyahu believes he did nothing criminal, and if he did nothing criminal, he shouldn't admit to doing something criminal. So it really depends on what the nature of the plea bargain is. But I do think whichever way it goes, this case should end. It should no longer be in court. It is a distraction, and it is falling apart legally and politically and internationally and domestically. It stands in the way of Israel presenting a united front. It's a divided country. It's divided over judicial reform. That's okay. The protests about the judicial reform are peaceful protests. They're democracy at work. And we ought to see democracy at work here, too. That is, the public ought to be able to judge Netanyahu's conduct. It obviously does not violate any firm, clear, unambiguous legal rules. And it's always the nature of rules that you should have clarity. You know, the Torah says when it advises judges what to do, lo takir panim, do not recognize faces, do it blindfold, do it based on evidence and justice. And I do not believe the evidence is here today. I think today that the reasons for pushing further on Netanyahu have much more to do with the opposition to him politically, and that's something that should be decided by the voters, not by judges or by prosecutors. So I'm hoping that what the judges said last week to the prosecutors will send them a powerful message that the unity of Israel requires that this case, one way or another, be dropped and ended.